Well, now, Proverbs is a strange book to be in the Bible. I don't think any of you would have put it in the Bible, but God did. So it's part of His Word. And when you first read it, it seems to be a jumble of folk sayings or just common sense, except that sense isn't all that common. There are humorous observations which really have you laughing. Above all, they don't seem very spiritual. They don't talk about your private or your public devotions much. Very down to earth. Some of them are pretty obvious. Poverty is the ruin of the poor. I would have thought anybody could have said that. A happy heart makes the face cheerful. Well, we knew that. Better to live in the attic than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Like one who seizes a dog by the ears is a passerby who meddles in a quarrel not his own. That's a profound observation. And many of them seem more entertaining than edifying, and some actually seem downright immoral. How about this one? A bribe does wonders. It will bring you before men of importance. Unfortunately, in the Authorized Version, that was translated, a man's gift will make room for him. And we've given such a spiritual meaning to that. But it means a money gift. And that'll get you in somewhere. That's quite an observation. It's certainly true, but is it moral? Many, of course, have found their way into everyday speech. Spare the rod and spoil the child. Comes straight out of this book. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Pride goes before a fall. Stolen food is sweet. Iron sharpens iron. We're familiar with these, and many people who use these proverbs haven't a clue where they came from, but they came from our Bible. We recognize other people in the book of Proverbs. The woman who talks too much. The wife who's always nagging. The aimless youth hanging around street corners. The neighbor who's always dropping in and staying too long. The friend who's unbearably cheerful first thing in the morning. You recognize all kinds of people here, but do you recognize yourself? I think that's the key to reading the book of Proverbs. As James says, you read the Bible like a mirror, but if you forget what you saw, it'll be no use to you. Well, at least it deals with life as it really is. This is not life in church. This is life in the street, in the office, in the shop, life at home. And it's really saying godliness is worked out in real life. It's not just something you do on Sundays in church. It's how you live through the week in every other situation. There are 900 proverbs here, and they cover the whole of life. They cover every conceivable subject, wisdom and folly, pride and humility, love and lust, wealth and poverty, work and leisure, masters and servants, husbands and wives, friends and relatives. I'm always amused at that phrase. You know, when you draw up a list of guests for a wedding, you have friends, relatives. One list is those you have to invite, and the other list is those you want to invite. As if relatives can't be friends. It's about life and death. It's all here. And that's why it's such a relevant book. But it's not religious. There are no priests in this book and no prophets. There are some kings, but that's all. We would call this secular life, except that's a very dangerous word. It is not a biblical word. We should never use it. Though I've heard it used in conversations here already. There is nothing secular except sin in God's sight. It is the Greeks who divided life into sacred and secular. And it's a very dangerous thing. Don't ever say you've got a secular job. Because in biblical terms, that would mean you're in a sinful job and you oughtn't to be in it. But every job is sacred to God. That is your sacred vocation. Whether you're a computer operator, taxi driver, or preacher. God would rather have a good taxi driver than a bad missionary. And all work ranks the same to God. Amen. So let's get rid of this idea that life is in two compartments, sacred and secular. Book of Proverbs is about living the sacred life in the secular sphere and making that sacred too. So God is interested in every part of life. And therefore, this book is about where most of our waking life is lived, which is not in church. I would call it the key to the good life. What is the good life? The television comedy program, The Good Life, gave one interpretation of that, but the Bible gives quite a different one. Usually people in the world talk about the good life in material terms. The Bible talks about it in moral terms. And in the Bible, folly, foolishness is not a mental thing, it's a moral thing. And wisdom is not mental, it's moral. To put it simply, this book is about how to make the most of life and also about how to waste it. And a fool throws his life away. A wise man uses it well. And when you get to the end of life and look back on it, will you feel you've wasted it or made the most of it? That's terribly important because it's terribly easy to waste life, and we only get one bite at the cherry. We only get one chance at life. You don't get another. We get one life. You got one chance to use yesterday and not waste it. You got one chance to use today and not waste it. You never get the day back. And as my father used to tell us as children frequently, he said, now life is too short to waste a single moment, but it's long enough to live out God's purpose for it. So this is what the book is about. Don't be a fool and throw your life away and waste it and get to the end of it feeling you've been on a roundabout and you've got off just where you got on and you've lost your money. But get to the end of the life and look back and say, I've made the most of my life. I've fulfilled what God wanted done in it. Now, this is why there are a number of books in the Bible we call wisdom literature. And the Bible is to make us wise. It will not make you clever or smart or popular or famous or wealthy. But it can make you wise. That's why God gave us this book. And some books, like the book of Proverbs, or in the New Testament, the letter of James, are there as wisdom books to help to make us wise in how we use life. In a word, salvation is very near the word salvage, which we used to use in World War II for what people call recycling today. And when I preach on salvation today, I constantly use the word recycling. If somebody asks me what business I'm in, I say I'm in the recycling business. And they always smile, as if that's a good thing to do. And if they ask, are you recycling metal or paper or tin? I say, no, people. Because they're the real problem. They're the real cause of pollution of our planet. And recycling means to rescue something before it's thrown away on the rubbish dump and make it useful for its original purpose. And so we're recycling all kinds of things these days, bottles and newspapers and everything else. Now, hell, said Jesus, is like a rubbish dump. It's like the valley of Gehenna outside Jerusalem, where all the garbage was thrown. That's why he always used the verb thrown of hell. He didn't say God sends you to hell. He says you will be thrown into hell, because rubbish you throw away. But you can save rubbish before it's too far gone, get it recycled and use it again for its original purpose. That's exactly what salvation is all about. God is recycling human beings so that they can be used again for the original purpose for which he made them. Got it? That's the whole business. Recycling rubbish is what salvation is all about before it's thrown away for good. Now, therefore, God is in the business of turning sinners into saints, of turning fools into wise people, or in a very simple phrase, salvation is about turning silly people into sensible people. That's why Jesus died. He didn't just die to save us from hell. He died so that we might be recycled. He was made sin on our behalf that we might become the righteousness of God in him. He says, give me your sin and I'll give you my righteousness, and we'll get you recycled and able to serve God again. That's what it's all about. And a silly man will waste his life. A sensible man will use it properly. And so Proverbs is about what we are saved for. Not about what we're saved by, but what we're saved for. Very often we misquote a text in the New Testament And it says God is able to save to the uttermost. And we usually translate that, God is able to save from the guttermost. But that's not what it says. He's able to save to the uttermost. It's what we are saved to that is important. God is saving us to be sensible people who can make the most of life and be useful to Him again. And that's why I'm not saved. I never say that. I'm being saved. I'm on the way of salvation. I'm not fully saved yet. This body is not saved yet. That's still heading for the rubbish bin. But it's going to be redeemed, going to get a new one. So salvation is not just from sin and silliness, it's to sainthood, it's to being sensible and using life properly for God. And Proverbs, therefore, is about what we're saved to.